Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Hello and welcome. This morning, Israeli occupation forces raided the city of Rafah in southern Gaza, demolishing a home and razing agricultural land before withdrawing. In Gaza, 1 week after the assassination of founder Sheikh Yassin, Hamas movement members reenacted the assassination by Israeli missiles that targeted the Hamas leadership. The people of Gaza live in tension, trying to return to normal life while living at the center of destruction created by Israeli forces.
3
U.S. soldiers were severely wounded in the area of Marab in central Ramadi, west of Baghdad, when their patrol unit came under attack by armed men using RPG missiles. Meanwhile, 3 Iraqis were wounded by random attacks in the area. An Iraqi military source said that 6 U.S. soldiers were wounded in another attack in Ramadi. In Hilya, south of Baghdad, 1 person was killed and 7 others were injured by a car bomb in front of the home of General Qais Aboud, the province's chief of police from the former regime. The general and his family survived, but 2 neighbors were wounded, and the body parts of the person who carried out the attack were found in the car. The car bomb resulted in destroying part of the home. Meanwhile, yesterday, Sudanese security forces arrested 11 officers in the army, accusing them of planning to overthrow the government. Most of these officers are from the western part of Sudan, the central area of the war. Hassan al-Turabi, the leader of the opposition People's Congress Party, denied any participation in an attempt to oust President Omar Bashir through a military coup. On to the Palestinian issue. The Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip are commemorating the 28th anniversary of Land Day. Massive demonstrations and rallies were organized and led by Palestinian leaders. During the rallies, calls were made to continue with the resistance and the Intifada until Palestinian demands are met. The demonstration ended with festivities at the Palestinian Legislative Council. The Palestinian outcries rejecting the construction of the separating wall could be heard in all the Palestinian territories. Rallies and demonstrations were organized protesting the Israeli government's expansion plan. The most notable demonstrations were held in villages in Ramallah and Jenin, where the land is being raised and built on. Hundreds of Palestinians, foreign and Israeli supporters launched their demonstrations from these villages, heading to the land which is being flattened. The demonstrators expressed their desire to hold on to their land by planting olive trees in areas threatened to be bulldozed.
That is 500 dunums over there. They took 400 dunums of olive trees by force. Then they want to build settlements here. Why won't they go to the borders of the 1967, to Wadi al-Qameh? These are not the borders here.
The protesters are marking Land Day by trying to attract international attention to the Palestinians' harsh reality, since Tel Aviv is attempting to force them to migrate by building the separating wall on one hand and confiscating their land to construct settlements on the other hand.
In 1967, they released a military order confiscating the Otron village. The size of the village is approximately 70,000 dunums, including Beit Nuba, Yamo, and Ams. Then in 1994 or 1995, actually in 1994, they took 2,000 dunums of our village here, Beit Liqya. Then now, they want to take what is left of the village, which is about 13,000 dunums, which are going to be lost behind the wall.
Israeli and foreign peace activists are launching their efforts on this day in solidarity with the Palestinians against the confiscation of land, also to stand against Israel's expansion plan and convey the reality of the situation to their countries.
What's happening now in these villages west of Ramallah?
What is happening now in these villages west of Ramallah is for us unbelievable. It is important for us to be here next to the Palestinians, to stop the construction of the separating wall on the land.
The demonstrations were mostly peaceful, but some of them were met with force by the occupation soldiers who clashed with Palestinians in the town of Betunia near Ramallah. For more than 28 years, the Palestinians have been fighting for their rights, to at least keep it alive in their children's memories, rejecting the wrongdoings of the consecutive Israeli governance by expansion and confiscation projects, including the separating wall, which consumes more than half of the West Bank. Majid Saeed, Abu Dhabi Television, the town of Betunia, Ramallah.
Prime Minister Ariel Sharon warned leftist parties in his government that he will instantly form a new government in case they left his cabinet. The leftists launched a harsh campaign against Sharon, calling on him not to travel to Washington and to freeze any political step until the final word on the Israeli state attorney Edna Arbel takes her final word on Sharon's bribe-taking scandal.
The Israeli leftist party launched a sharp campaign on their traditional ally, Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, over his disengagement plan with the Palestinians. This came after Sharon insisted to move forward in his plan despite the state attorney Edna Arbel's recommendation for his indictment for bribe-taking. He also threatened to search for new allies in case his current coalition disintegrated. Mafdal party head Avi Etam warned executing the disengagement plan and forming a secular government will lead to annulling the Jewish identity for Israel. He also advised Sharon not to travel to Washington in such circumstances. In this context, Knesset member Benny Ayalon said Sharon must refrain from embarking in issues that are not consensusly agreed upon until the government judicial advisor decision is made clear.
I believe that the king alone is not subject to investigation, and Sharon has many plans, but he is not a king.
Ma'arif Daily revealed that Sharon recently reached an agreement with officials in the Labour Party to form a national unity government in exchange for withdrawing from Gaza within a year and granting the party 6 ministerial seats. However, contacts were frozen following the recommendation of the state attorney to indict Sharon. According to Haaretz Daily, the Israeli army is also perplexed, trying to evaluate the possibility of its withdrawal from the Gaza Strip on the light of the bribe-taking recommendation against Sharon.
The memory of Sheikh Ahmed Yassin is still vivid in the minds of all Palestinians. Display shows in a replica the assassination of the cleric in an Israeli missile strike last Monday. It's an image which has caused great anger in Hamas and in Gaza. The assassination of Sheikh Yassin is seen as the start of a new phase in the Intifada.
A soldier has been killed in one of several attacks to hit occupied Iraq. A bomb blast west of Baghdad killed a soldier in the U.S.-led occupation force and wounded another. The U.S. military has declined to specify the nationality of the victims of the bombings. In other attacks, 2 U.S. military vehicles were damaged in the tense western city of Ramadi. A roadside bomb exploded as a U.S. convoy was passing, damaging a military truck. Residents gathered near the site of the damaged truck, shouting anti-U.S. and Israeli slogans. In a separate attack, a U.S. Humvee was set ablaze after coming under attack. An Iraqi policeman was slightly wounded in a suicide car bomb attack outside the house of a police chief in Hela, south of Baghdad. At least 3 Iraqi police and 2 protesters were wounded in Najaf after a demonstration by unemployed Iraqis turned violent. A witness said riot erupted after Spanish troops began firing on protesters. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Kofi Annan dismissed his security chief after a highly critical report on last year's bombings of UN offices in Baghdad. Annan asked UN Security Coordinator Tan Miat to resign after the report concluded that he had ignored signs of a developing crisis in Baghdad before the August blast which killed 22 people, including UN envoy Sergei Demille. But Annan rejected the resignation of UN Deputy Secretary General Louise Fachette, who was the chairperson of the UN steering group on Iraq in May, when the UN agreed to send its senior staff back to Baghdad after the occupation.
In the light of the above findings and conclusions of the panel, the Deputy Secretary General tendered her resignation to the Secretary General. The Secretary General, taking into account the collective nature of the failures attributable to the steering group on Iraq as a whole, declined to accept the resignation. The Secretary General regretted the failures identified by the panel and expressed his determination to take all corrective measures within his authority to enhance the safety and security of all UN staff, especially those deployed in dangerous conflict areas.
In one of Britain's biggest anti-terror operations, police have arrested 8 men after discovering a cache of explosives during raids at dawn. With Europe already on a high state of alert after the Madrid bombings, 700 officers conducted 24 separate raids, seizing more than half a ton of ammonium nitrate fertilizer, a prime bomb-making material. The arrest of the 8 men, all British, aged between 17 to 32, was based on suspicion of preparing to carry out acts of terrorism. The suspects were believed to be Muslims of Pakistani origin. Head of Britain's anti-terror branch told the news conference that the fertilizer was discovered in a 6-foot-high plastic bag in a West London warehouse, but there was no evidence to suggest an attack was being planned. Since Britain's sweeping anti-terror laws, around 500 people have been held, with only 90 charged with terrorism-related offenses.
The finance minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, said that he will support the unilateral separation plan on 3 conditions: the completion of the anti-terrorism security fence, maintaining total Israeli control over crossing points and entrances, and the right to do whatever needed on the security level to fight terrorism, and that the U.S. publicly announced that it opposes the Palestinian right of return. Netanyahu gave a speech at a ceremony that was held to honor prominent figures in the Department of Commerce.
It is impossible to do any kind of withdrawal without sufficiently addressing the risks. In order to prevent terrorists from increasing their capabilities after the withdrawal, we will have to make sure that Israel maintains total control over all international crossing points, via land, sea, or air, at least until we reach a political solution. Otherwise, what will happen is that after we withdraw, a lot of forces will emerge with weapons, exposing us to danger that we have never seen. Thus, we must maintain total control over entrance points. There is no guarantee that the terrorists will not continue hitting us from there once we withdraw. As an example, they could launch missiles from above the fence on our cities. We must maintain the right to fight terrorism freely in the most decisive manner everywhere. To achieve that end, we need American support, as well as the support of the United Nations Security Council and other international organizations. We must complete the construction of the security fence before we do any kind of withdrawal. This fence must be completed not only to defend the settlements, but also to defend every Israeli citizen.
The Labour Party discussed the political and economic situation 1 year after Mr. Sharon took office. The unilateral separation from the Palestinians was also discussed. The leader of the Labour Party, Shimon Peres, confirmed that the Labour Party will support the government on the withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. But he warned against partial withdrawal from the West Bank, because in his eyes, that will not end the conflict.
If this government, which we have not been negotiating with, withdraws from Gaza, then we will support its decision to withdraw from Gaza. If this government dismantles settlements, we will vote in support of dismantling the settlements. Though I'm afraid that instead of having such an agreement, which will bring us peace, the government might have a plan to divide the West Bank into different parts. Then the intifada and conflict will continue. We must move toward a comprehensive peace according to the roadmap.
India expressed its disappointment with the U.S. decision to elevate Pakistan to the stature of a major non-NATO ally, because it was not notified of it beforehand. The spokesman of the Indian Foreign Ministry said that this decision will have implications on the U.S.-Indian relations. The U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell announced this during his visit to Pakistan last Thursday, only one day after he left India.
We have seen the statement made in Islamabad by the United States Secretary of State on March 18 on a prospective notification to the United States Congress to designate Pakistan as a major non-NATO ally for the purposes of military-to-military relations. The Secretary of State was in India just 2 days before this statement was made in Islamabad. While he was in India, there was much emphasis on India-United States strategic partnership. It is disappointing that he did not share with us this decision of the United States government. We are studying the details of this decision, which has significant implications for India-US relations, and we are in touch with the US government in this regard.
In Jordan, the failure of the Arab Summit in Tunis comes as no surprise, especially under the cloud of the increasingly opposing positions among Arab governments. The Jordanian newspaper reported on the failed summit on their front pages, but the writers and analysts did not have enough time to write about the failure and the postponement of the summit. Some of them wrote about their feelings on these results. Sultan al-Hattab wrote about the inability of Arabs to meet, organize, and face challenges.
The Arab regimes are caught between foreign interventions and dissatisfied by Arab populations. I believe that the distance between the Arab regimes and foreign forces is closer than the distance between Arab regimes and their populations.
Waqif Mahadir, the chief of staff of the newspaper Al-Wahda Al-Usbu'iyya, said that all signs indicated that this summit would be postponed or cancelled.
There are no conditions to hold such a summit, aside from the fact that it is difficult for all Arab capitals to agree on the agenda. Arab regimes, without exception, are facing difficulties. There were hot issues which were hard to resolve in a persuasive, balanced, or even moderate manner.
Atif al-Julani, chief of staff of Al-Sabil Islamic Weekly, said that they were hoping that the summit would not fail, especially at this time when America is attempting to cancel the regional Arab and Islamic initiatives and replace them with American and Zionist agendas.
We hope that the summit will be held in a responsible manner, especially because of the important challenges considering the rise of Zionist crimes and American attempts to label the Muslim nation with terrorism, accusing it as being the source of extremism.
Ordinary Jordanians expressed their disappointment with the results, which reflect Arab weakness in the face of foreign pressure.
I am not optimistic about it. I'm pessimistic. Our Arab leaders are regressing backwards, not moving forward.
They are not able to change anything. That is why they did not hold the summit. That is the simple reality.
The results of past Arab summits did not bring anything new and did not achieve anything. Because of this, Arabs don't see the failure of this summit as strange.
It may be that Arab people have been accustomed to the failures of their leaders to reach resolutions on important issues in a reasonable manner. Some people even hoped that this summit would never be held, fearing that it would complicate issues rather than resolve them.
United Arab Emirates has welcomed Egypt's offer to host the Arab Summit. The UAE Foreign Minister Rashid Abdallah said the UAE President, His Highness Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, is well known for his support of Arab solidarity and unity. Egypt suggested that the summit, which was called off by Tunis, be held within 3 weeks.
Suggested the Arab Summit be held in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Mubarak gave no date for the summit, but it was likely to be held on April 16, according to diplomats. Egypt said on Sunday it was ready to host the meeting after expressing astonishment and regret at the postponement of the summit that had been due to open in Tunis on Monday. Tunisia said it had postponed the meeting because of disagreements on an agenda. The division concerned how to respond to a U.S. plan for democratic reform in Arab states and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. But delegates said Tunis was unhappy that some Arab leaders did not plan to attend the summit and wanted to prove its democratic credentials to Washington. Following Egypt's offer to host the summit, Tunisia said it reserved the right to host the meeting and a change of venue was no solution. Several Arab leaders have welcomed Egypt's proposal to reschedule the summit, and news agencies said Mubarak spoke to several of his Arab counterparts by telephone about arrangements. The rule of the 22-nation Arab League allow Egypt, as the site of the League's headquarters, to convene a summit if the scheduled host is unable to. Chris Manders, Dubai Television.
The Pakistani army has said its forces killed an intelligence chief in Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda network during a 12-day Pakistani offensive against militants on the Afghan border. It identified the man as Mr. Abdullah but would not provide further details. A bloody offensive in South Waziristan district ended with more than 100 people killed. US forces are also hunting on the other side of the mountainous border in a pincer operation.
The 12-day sweep on Pakistan's desolate Afghan frontier and the hunt for Islamic militants seems to have brought its fruit, according to the Pakistani army, who announced the killing of a spy chief in Al-Qaeda network.
Mr. Tahir Yaldashev, who is number 10 in the Al-Qaeda hierarchy, he was injured along with his associates, and he is hiding somewhere. It has also been confirmed by the intelligence sources that Mr. Abdullah, who was the chief of the Al-Qaeda intelligence, Mr. Abdullah, this is the only name that I have. No, I have only this name so far. No other information. He was the chief of the intelligence of Al-Qaeda. He was killed in this operation. Have been killed.
Capturing Yaldashev would be a prize for President Pervez Musharraf, who accuses a tribal area with links to Al-Qaeda of being behind 2 attempts on his life in December. The Pakistani army said it would flush foreign fighters from its mountainous tribal territories bordering eastern Afghanistan after a bloody offensive in South Waziristan district ended on Sunday with more than 100 people killed. About 50 soldiers were killed and an unknown number of fighters escaped, possibly through a labyrinth of tunnels. A dozen civilians, mostly women and children, are also believed dead. Villagers have begun returning to their demolished homes after seeking shelter in other villages during the operation. In the latest of series of small militant attacks elsewhere on the border, 2 rockets were fired at a paramilitary camp in North Waziristan late on Sunday, causing some damage but no injuries. US forces are hunting on the other side of the mountainous border in a pincer operation. The United States believed militants linked to Al-Qaeda were behind bomb blast in Madrid earlier this month that killed 190 people. Jamal Ali, Dubai Television.
Uzbekistan has launched a massive hunt for suspects after 2 women set off bombs at a children's store and a bus stop in the capital. They were the first suicide attacks in the former Soviet Central Asia. That's now a key supporter of the US-led war on terror. At least 19 people were killed in a wave of mayhem that also included 2 assaults on police and an explosion at a bomb-making hideaway.
At least 19 people were killed in a series of explosions and shootouts in Uzbekistan on Monday, in what authorities said were terrorist actions aimed at splitting the US-led anti-terror coalition. Prosecutor General Rashid Kadyrov said a further 26 people had been wounded in the ancient city of Bukhara on Sunday and the capital Tashkent on Monday morning. He also said the 10 people's deaths in Bukhara was linked to preparation of an explosive device by the terrorists. 3 policemen and 1 child died in 2 suicide bomb attacks in Tashkent. Both female suicide bombers also died. Foreign Minister Sadiq Safayev accused international terror groups, including the local Hizb ut-Tahrir and Wahhabis. Hizb ut-Tahrir is apparently aiming to set up a pan-Islamic state that would include post-Soviet Central Asia and the Wahhabi branch of Islam. Both are now outlawed in Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan is a close Washington ally in the US-led war on terror. A series of killings of officials in 1997 was blamed on Islamic extremists and led to severe restrictions on any non-state-sponsored Islamic activity. Under hardline President Islam Karimov, Uzbekistan has been sharply criticized by human rights bodies and some West European nations for its intolerance of any opposition. Isam Ahmed, Dubai Television.
After meeting the Afghani President Hamid Karzai, the U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell reiterated that his country is supportive to the Afghani government and confirmed that there is a need to continue pursuing Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda members. Pursuing members of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban movement overshadowed the visit of the U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell to Kabul. The difficult Afghani elections were also part of his discussions with Karzai amid the slow process of reconstruction and the hesitancy of donor countries to deliver on their promises. Not to mention the lack of security, especially in the southwestern part of the country, and the fact that Karzai's presidential term is about to end. This worries the American administration, who is entering into the race for the U.S. presidential election. Observers say that Washington is hoping to achieve progress in southwestern Asia.
Some sort of an election.
If there is some kind of election in which a re-representation for the Afghani people can be formed, then the situation might improve. Only the Afghani people can achieve progress. The role of foreign forces is only temporary.
Meanwhile, the improved Indian and Pakistani relations have changed the situation on the ground in the region. Though nuclear proliferation was the most heated topic that Colin Powell discussed with the Pakistani leadership, Islamabad responded by testing the Shahab-2 missile system to show that the Pakistani nuclear and missile programs are still going forward. However, Washington may not be satisfied with measures taken by Islamabad concerning the nuclear scientists who are involved in nuclear proliferation. Washington is demanding Pakistan to disclose old files, including the ones that led Pakistan to obtain nuclear weapons.
Pakistan is not being investigated.
Pakistan is not being investigated. Rather, Pakistan voluntarily launched an extended investigation on its own. Pakistan desires to involve the international community and the International Atomic Energy Agency, and of course the big players.
Islamabad refused to allow the American forces to cross the Pakistani border to follow members of the Al-Qaeda organization and Taliban movement. However, the recent military operations carried out by the Pakistani army and the militias in tribal areas illustrated the level of difficulty that Islamabad faces when dealing with the tribes. The killing of 40 Pakistani soldiers in one day must have been a sufficient warning not to take more risks. Islamabad may have succeeded in answering questions raised by Washington before the visit of Colin Powell. What is left is how to continue cooperation as the American elections approach. Samar Alaway, Al-Akbariya, Islamabad.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.